dollars from sponsors, like it's not.
Yeah, yeah, this is kind of grassroots, and I just really am selective on who I
Yeah.
talk to. I'm not trying to talk to the trending whatever account or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's just not my vibe. But how you been?
I've been good, learning how to be a mom and work and find balance with all that.
Oh yeah, that's a life journey. That's a lifelong journey right there.
I know
How many
I have figured that out.
how many kids do you have now?
I just have one.
Do you have one? How old is she? She's a girl, right?
Yeah, she's 10 months.
Oh wow, you're a new mama.
Yeah.
So when we spoke last,
I
was
was super
that
pregnant.
yeah, you hadn't had her yet.
No, I was like really close to my due date though. I would
Okay.
think I was like less than a month away.
Yeah. And like we did that live and the lives just suck, like to be honest. Like,
I
it's like
know.
we do them and we hope that it helps the algorithm or whatever, but in retrospect, it's like, okay, we just spent an hour talking with someone. They spent an hour with us talking with us. Like we need to like make sure that the information is like accessible to everybody. And so again, we just
Yeah.
kind of wanted to like redo that with you because I just felt like our conversation was super valuable for everybody. And I also enjoyed you and our conversation too. So I was like
Me
down to like,
too.
yeah, to I was down to like just go that route again. So anyways, we're just gonna go because it's already being
Yeah.
recorded. We're gonna edit out all the fluff. I'm gonna redo an intro after the talk, so it's kind of like makes sense, and then it kind of leads in, and it's just kind of like this is all organic, I mean, the main things that
Yeah.
I did want to cover, and then we'll go into them. It's just kind of like your journey. I love what you're doing with the minerals. Pretty much the same thing as last time, but we'll probably go a little bit deeper into subjects. But I really wanted to ask you specific questions on like, what are the main minerals you see are deficient? What are the main things that like turn the needle for you? And then, just basic stuff like that. I know that thyroid was an issue for you in the past. It was an issue for me
Yeah.
as well. I mean, when I did consults, I never saw somebody come in who wasn't either hyper or hypothyroid. Yeah,
Yeah.
I never saw that. It was always there. And like for me, I would do these talks on the gut thyroid connection and just talk about like that kind of gut dysbiosis kind of angle and like how everyone's guts kind of just being super hammered with just shit. Really, it's like from glyphosate to rancid seed oils, and a lot of that is just people wanting to go out to eat occasionally and not have to cook dinner. It's and then you get exposed to these things. To also people that aren't really on the health vibe journey, right? Where they're like kind of like not truly aware of how bad things like Roundup can be inside their body, and maybe they don't think that small amounts are an issue, especially if they're buying organic. But a lot of these people, I guess really wouldn't even fit into that category. They're kind of like just buy whatever. They're more like Trader Joe shoppers or Sprout shoppers, and they just kind of buy whatever. And a lot of us, they're just not aware of how bad it really is. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh man, you gain access to this information and awareness as to like what's really going on. And I always say to myself, and I try to tell other people around me, friends and family, with great power comes great responsibility. So if you access this knowledge, um, or knowledge is power, or whatever, then a lot of times what can happen is it can psychologically fuck you up because now you live in this kind of doomsday kind of mentality. And I see it so much. I see it with like people, even some people around me that are like constantly posting memes about how bad it is, or the banking system's going to collapse, or this is going to happen. And it's all this kind of
Yeah.
super negative. And I like, to me, that's exactly what that energy wants. Like, that energy wants you
Yeah.
constantly fixated on itself, and misery loves company. So as long as you're posting these things, and look, I know we need to create an awareness, but I just feel like we're in a day and age now where we need to be creating solutions, and we need to actually do things that create change versus just constantly sit on a soapbox, just blah 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 blah, and like regurgitate things through memes and things like this. It's so unhealthy, and I feel like it's pushing people in a direction that is only going to make things worse for themselves, because as we know, we're all part of the one, right? We're all interconnected, and we're all collectively, tied to each other as like one human race. So it seems like, what could one person do? But our individual reality is everything, and through that individual realization, that individual self journey of being able to be a true sovereign, like, and what that means, be a true steward, and do things like what you're doing, and do things like what we do at Crucial Four, then you're never going to see any change anywhere, because it's like these other people that are on the fence, they need something to wake them up. And I don't necessarily think that it's us bitching about it that wakes people up. Maybe to some degree.
Yeah.
I think what it is, it's not seen. It's something that's not seen. It's this inner journey that creates a ripple through vibration that we can't physiologically see. And science hasn't been able to measure it yet. I mean, I guess some of that stuff actually has been measured, now that I think about it. When I look at like Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and what's the guy who did the epigenetic guy, um, so yeah, I just feel like it's our responsibility that once we have this knowledge, that we don't let the knowledge bring us down and tear us down to where we're constantly kind of in this negative self vibration, I guess, if you will, like surrounding ourselves with the problem, and knowing that the solution might seem so far away, but understanding that there are solutions out there, and things you can do. And I say all this because I feel like what you're doing, it fits in line with this, because like in your story that you talk about, it's the same story I have, same story I hear, and that's probably why you've grown so well on Instagram, is because so many people relate to your story. It's like you have a health concern, and it's like basically like a bucket with a bunch of holes in it, and you're putting your finger on these holes, which the finger could represent, like you say, like a thyroid herb, or a thyroid medication, or a specific symptom chasing solution. And you come to the full picture where it's like, hey, what's the foundation to my physiology? What's the foundation to what's going on within my body? And this is the very thing that we have issues with in the brick and mortar institutions, like with education. They teach us all this stuff, but the foundation of where it all comes from is wrong, right? So it's like in allopathic medicine, it's symptom chasing, symptom addressing. But in the new paradigm, or the actual paradigm, or the holistic paradigm, or in your paradigm, it's, hey, minerals. Like, let's look at the foundation of our body and what it's made of. And I always think about the cell salts, because the cell salts, if people don't know, there's 12 cell salts. And the way that they comprise of those salts is they actually burnt the body. And through the ashes they found of the physical, they found these 12 different salts. And the correlation to that in the zodiac and the moon and the stars, and like all this universal energy, how it all kind of comes in and correlates, it's a beautiful thing, because once you kind of start to go down that path and understand that, it becomes way simpler, right? It's like, go get your hair analysis, right? That's what you're doing. You're like, get your minerals
Mm-hmm.
checked out, like see where your minerals are first. And it's not that these thyroid herbs don't help. It's not that these things like cold exposure don't help. Because I know for a fact, cold exposure, for example, has helped my thyroid tremendously. Because I was always one to like, I'm cold. Like, even when it's not that cold, and I know that's my thyroid. Like, it's the thermostat. I look at the thyroid as like a thermostat. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, if I'm not able to adapt to certain environment, and I'm like cold, and my mom was always like that, I'm like, dude, that's hypothyroidism. Like, right there. Like, that's just like me. But through cold exposure, through mineralization, then, or let me start first, mineralization, then cold exposure, then working with the herbs. Now I'm healthier and stronger and more fit and more resilient than I've ever been before. And I'm sure you can attest to that. So uh, I'm going to shut up. I would love for you to elaborate and kind of just start from the beginning, tell your story to our audience, because I think it's so powerful and so relatable. And again, I want to thank you for being on today.
Thanks for having me. I love the bucket analogy. I'm probably going to steal that with the holes in it and then using using your finger that represents different things. I had
Yeah.
many holes and many different fingers trying to cover those holes on my journey. And I really like how you specified that, like, for you it's like you remineralize, then cold therapy, then herbs, because I think people want to jump ahead and skip to like cold therapy and herbs, and I'm like, your body probably can't even handle cold therapy right now.
Right.
It will probably be too stressful, because you don't have the mineral resources to back it up. And that's kind of like where a lot of like my journey was, and a lot of issues I see with clients and thyroid issues like I had, a lot of it was related to stress. And I was on the pill for many years, like most women. I think it's like 70, at least 70% of women have been on the pill at some point in their lifetime. And when I got off, I decided to come off because I was like making lots of changes, healthy lifestyle wise, and I was like, I'm still taking this prescription medication. Like, this feels a little weird.
Mm.
And I didn't think anything of it. My doctor's like, you're good, go for it. You can just stop taking it. And so I did. And then I didn't get my period for almost a year. Actually, I think it was probably just over like 13 months. And during that 13 months, I had gained a ton of weight. My acne got worse. I'm going to the doctor and I'm like, when should I be concerned that I haven't gotten my period yet? Because I'd never had irregular cycles in my whole life, even before the pill. So to me, I was like, this feels like a huge red flag, but no one thought it was a big deal. They basically said, if you don't want to get pregnant right now, it doesn't matter. And I'm like,
Right.
I think it does. But, and that was really what kicked me off into realizing that, one, like, no one cares about your health like you do. And you have to be a very fierce advocate for yourself. And then also that female health and our periods and our cycles, they're really important and they are a sign of our health and vitality. And the more I learned about it, the more I'm like, wow, I can't believe I took a pill that was suppressing this for 7 years. And that really just like got me onto the journey of learning about hormones, trying to figure out why I wasn't ovulating. They did eventually run labs for me because I kept pressing my doctor, being like, I think there's something wrong. Because I was like an athlete, I was competing in CrossFit, I was very young. I'm like, there's no reason I should be gaining weight and not having a cycle right now. They said it was because I was working out too much, but I like the only thing that changed was the pill. So then finally they're like, okay, well, you have hypothyroidism because my TSH was very high.
Mm.
And they're like, they tested my hormones and my androgens, my male hormones were also high. So they assumed I had PCOS. But I'm like, how? I never had this before. So to them, they're like, go back on the pill. That will solve your problems and take a thyroid medication. And like, that
More
was their kind
pills.
of fingers over the holes on the bucket. Yeah, I know. Just
Right.
more, we'll just double up your pills. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I didn't go on the pill. I tried to take thyroid meds, but I didn't tolerate them well. And now when I look back, it's because I didn't have the resources, right? I was speeding up my metabolism by increasing the amount of thyroid hormone in my body, but I definitely did not have the mineral resources to back that up. So I had like lots of hair loss when I tried to take thyroid medication and anxiety and that sort of thing. And I was like, I thought it was supposed to do the opposite. So that just kind of led me to shifting my focus from sports nutrition to women's health and trying to like be an advocate for myself. And then I was like, I want to help other women be an advocate for themselves too. Cause they're just, I mean, this was like almost 13 years ago. So there wasn't information out there like there is now.
Yeah.
Dr. Jolene Brighton has a book on how to come off the pill, so there's a lot of information out there now.
Yeah. It seems like they see and they saw, and they're still seeing so much of the same issues that they're perplexed. Like they don't even know what to do. I mean, obviously the allopathic model doesn't work. It fails miserably. It's
Yeah.
definitely great at, I feel like if you get into an injury or a car wreck, I feel like we have the best emergency medical system in the world, hands down. Like I wouldn't want to, if I got into a catastrophe, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I've traveled all over the world. I want to be here. I want to be in America.
Yeah.
The response time, like all that stuff. But when it comes to like autoimmunity, gut dysbiosis, any type of these, like, I guess, lifestyle and health related illnesses or diseases, or disharmony. I really rather just say disharmony in the body. I hate the word disease; it just has this weird vibration around it.
Yeah,
Uh,
scary.
the, it's yeah, and that's what they want. I mean, I say that. The way that the system, I feel like, is set up, I used to think it's like these people are all against us, and it's, again, with great power comes great responsibility. That knowledge is power. So, but it's not. It's like a lot of these people that go to school, they want to be nurses or whatever. My sister was a nurse. They genuinely have good intentions. Like, they want to help people. And this is the way society or current culture has said that's how you do this. So we take these, like, healers, really, that are willing to sacrifice their time to help us, to help other people through service. The word deserve, service, they deserve so much. They're given, like, just this information that is just wrong. It's just not the best ever. And so, yeah, it's like empathy, right? Like, you got to have empathy for these people. Like, they truly want to help, but they truly do not know. Ignorance is bliss almost, in that regard. And so it's like, it's a tough, but I think at the end of the day, and where we're seeing a huge trajectory, is a lot of people are waking up to wanting to be self-sufficient, self-reliant on their community. So they want to be less dependent upon the food system at the grocery store, or toilet paper when the next pandemic happens. You know what I mean? Like, I think people started to see that in COVID. Like, if anything good came out of COVID, it definitely was probably that people started to understand, like, oh shit could hit the fan. When they see people like, and I'm not left or right wing, I'm not into that. I think it's all a big joke. I'm not a Biden supporter or a Trump supporter. I think they're I think it's all the puppet show. um but when you hear, like, stuff like what Biden's talking about now with the banking system, it's like this, all the memes they do to make fun of you. It's
Oh,
it's it's sad that it's funny, but it's the same
yeah.
narrative that's always being told since the dawn of time. To me, it's like they try to act like this is a new narrative or something new, but in reality, like, this is ancient. This has been happening forever. They just make it seem new because today is a new day in the year of our Lord 2023, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's it's interesting how you can get kind of sucked into that. So what are some of the things that you immediately notice shift the needle for you? You've elaborated on, like, kind of where you came from and your story, and and we all already know where you're going to go with this, but most people that are listening to this, they probably won't. So what are the things that you started to move the needle for you, and then really set the stage for you to create what you've created? And if people don't know this, Amanda has such a powerful system or knowledge that she's gained, that instead of doing one-on-ones, you've created this course where people can access this information that you've put together, and they can literally do the work themselves with you as a guide, you as a resource. And I just think that's so powerful, because when I did consults, the reason I don't do them anymore is because I would pour my heart and soul into someone, and their compliance, like, they wouldn't comply with half of what you tell them, right? So I think what you're doing is definitely on spot, because it's like, look, I'm going to show you what to do. I'm going to make this cheaper for everybody, but you still have to do the work. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like, and to me, like, that's the missing piece to almost everyone's health journey. Is that, like, they're not really willing to make those changes. And if there's a will, there's a way. We have to understand. We have to push ourselves. We have to understand that, like, all these things that can potentially create stress in our lives to some degree are super beneficial for us. Like, if we look at, like, waking up earlier than we used to, or switching a food that's maybe causing our issues to something else, like, we have to understand that this is going to create internal stress, mental stress on us, but we also have to understand that that's extremely beneficial for us when it's done properly. Like you can always overdo it, just like they kind of told you, oh, you're overworking out, you know what I mean, or whatever, because that's just the
Yeah.
main thing they see. Uh, but in reality, it's this toxic antibiotic known as the pill, right? That's totally throwing off the gut biome and the mucosal lining and like all the things that
Yeah. I
nature
took
wants.
antibiotics for like 2 years too for my acne.
Yeah,
So,
well,
I
so did
like
I. I
cringe
remember
when I
taking
think about
antibiotics
that.
for my acne. Yeah, I went to a,
Yeah.
a school and like, oh, I got zits on my face. Like pop, it had nothing to do with the flipping Pop Tarts they were feeding us and like the bull crap, cafeteria food that we occasionally ate. I mean, you got to think back then, organic really wasn't a thing, and our parents didn't
Yeah.
know, and that's when we really got hit hard with stuff, including our parents, because now it's like we at least have an option to get something that's not sprayed with chemicals, and that's known as organic,
Yeah.
which to me is still low grade. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's why I
Mhm.
started Crucial Four Farms. Is because it was like, even
Mhm.
though it's organic. So, anyways, I digress. Go back. What are some of the things that move the needle for you, so that we can start to get straight into some solutions for people, so they can start to kind of like, want to continue to listen and be like, oh, I need to try that. There's some action items.
Yeah, and really quick, I do have my course. I do still work one-on-one with people. I have 2 nutritionists that work with me, and
Oh,
so we
cool.
do see clients. I made the course because and you'll hear, I tried a lot of things on my healing journey just like most people. I mean, most women that come to see me, they've already been to conventional doctors and usually at least 1 or 2 holistic practitioners as well before they get to me, and it's very expensive. And I was only 20 when I started this whole journey. I was in college and I had no money. I had like less than no money because I was doing clinicals and you
Of
had to like
course.
drive all over the state and go to school full time. It was like a nightmare. I could barely work. And
Mhm.
so I am very passionate. Like once I like really dialed things down and I found hair testing, one, it's very affordable, the test itself, but then finally being able to put everything that I've learned into like a format in the course to help people interpret their own test. I was like, this is going to be for the people that can't afford to work one on one, that still want answers, and that are typically like fed up, like on their healing journey, which
Mhm.
is where I was when I found hair testing. Like I had gotten really into functional medicine because I couldn't get any help from conventional doctors. I saw an acupuncturist, and then a couple naturopaths, but even then, like it wasn't like getting me to like where I wanted to be, and I felt like I was still like just taking supplements and doing blood work and stuff, and I just couldn't figure out like why, like I'm like, okay, but like why? Like why is this imbalance here? And I remember I did hormone testing. I had every time I tested my hormones, I still had estrogen dominance. I'm like, how is this possible? I've been doing all these different things. I've did stool testing for my gut health and everything helped a little bit. Right? Like I would see some relief. I saw some improvements. My period, I finally got my cycle back. And then, like, eventually my periods started to get less and less painful. My skin would get a little bit better, but I still was like, how am I investing all this time and money and energy into my health? And I'm like, not seeing the results I want. And then one of my colleagues was like, why don't you do hair mineral testing? Because I had the copper IUD at the time. And he's like, I bet it's a copper issue. And I was like, oh, but then I'll have to figure out like what to do for birth control.
Yeah.
And because I didn't find like FAM yet, or fertility awareness method yet. And so then I did a hair test. It showed I had like really, really high calcium. I had calcium shell, which is when calcium goes so high that it like calcifies on your cells,
Right.
and really high copper. And so it was like your classic, like very slow metabolism profile. And I looked very hypothyroid on my hair test. And I'm like, okay, like this lines up with my symptoms, my mood, because calcium shell is like a very emotional type of like mineral pattern, and it just like really hit home for me, and it was nice to see all of the things I was feeling like on a test result. And I get that a lot from clients too, of like, a lot of my blood work comes back normal, but I still don't feel good. And then they do a hair test and they're like, okay, everything's not like perfect and normal. And then from there, I was like, okay, how the heck do I fix this? And that's what really sparked me into like learning more about iodine, which was a huge game changer for me as far as like my thyroid health goes. But I think the biggest thing that hair testing taught me And what really helped me, it took me, I feel like I'm still learning this, is like how
Of
much
course.
stress impacts your minerals.
Yep.
And like that's where mineral loss happens in the first place from different stressors. And I think even though I was like doing all the things, and I have so many clients that come to me, they're like, I'm doing all the things, I've tried this, this, and this. A lot of it's like checking off a box, right? It's just like getting the thing done. Like I wasn't necessarily doing everything with intention. I was just like, okay, I've done this. This isn't fixing it. What's the next thing? And I just think that like stressful fight or flight state was not serving me. And eventually it led to me just like completely burning out.
Yeah. But you did notice the iodine helped you. And I'm sure if your calcium
Yeah,
was high,
iodine was a really big one.
yeah, and I'm sure if your calcium was high, you immediately started looking at magnesium because of the calcium magnesium
Hmm.
relationship in the body. And if people aren't aware of that, like like I'm in Texas, so all our groundwater comes from us like limestone. So I see high calcium. You know, we have to understand like if you
Yeah.
shower, what is it? 1 liter per like 20, 30 minutes in a shower gets soaked into your body. So it's like a lot of us are doing the best we can with our water. A lot of people just do like the Berkeley filters and things like this, which I haven't researched it much, but from my standpoint, you know, and in the past I did lots of spring water. All that stuff has high calcium in it, and it's hard to
Yeah.
get that calcium out. Like even like the best spring waters in the world now, there's higher calcium than magnesium. But we have to understand that it wasn't always like that. It used to actually be higher magnesium to calcium ratios because we burn through magnesium so much quicker. And this is part of the stressors you're talking about. Like certain minerals have a burn rate comparative to others. And calcium doesn't necessarily have it. It's more so magnesium. And then so when the magnesium gets burned out and the calcium gets high, it starts getting deposited in places it's not supposed to, hence around your cells instead of inside your bones or in your arteries. And I mean, the number one
Yeah.
killer in America is heart disease. Our heart. Our heart is an electromagnetic organ. And the Earth has an electromagnetic pulse. The sun's putting electromagnetic energy out. And yet we all walk around with these electromagnetic devices. And I've even seen certain
Yeah.
people like go like do this shit and like keep it in there or put it in your pocket right next to your nuts. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy. And we have to understand like the screen I'm looking at right now. We are electromagnetic beings, and all of our electronics are in that same span of electromagnetism because that's how the earth works. That's how we work, right? So you did I'm sure you did magnesium. Sorry, I keep going on these rants here. I just
So
get so
so a
fired up.
caveat about the magnesium that I think is important to mention.
Yes, please.
So I love magnesium, and I feel like that's one of the first supplements I ever started taking. It's so well known, right? I think especially in this day and age, like everyone knows magnesium is important. I was taking a lot. Like I was probably taking close to like 900 to 1,000 milligrams of it because I was trying to get
Wow.
close to like 5 times my body weight,
Right.
which is like what's recommended if you have a deficiency. But the issue is that my sodium was also very low. And so,
Oh,
like, by the time I got to the stage and did hair testing, like, my sodium potassium were very depleted, which is super common because as those go down, sodium potassium, they're like our solvent minerals. So you're
right.
much more likely to have calcium and magnesium leave the cell. So, unknown, I didn't know I was doing anything that was like impairing that. But when you supplement with magnesium, it actually lowers aldosterone, which is a hormone that increases sodium retention. So I was definitely not doing myself any favor. I felt like I couldn't handle stress, which is
Right.
very common when you don't have a lot of sodium and potassium. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to back off magnesium. I still took some because when you use iodine, you need all the cofactors, and
Right.
magnesium is one of the cofactors.
Right.
And I don't think that a magnesium deficiency necessarily drove my calcium so high. I think it was like just stress in general,
Hmm.
because it was still really high even when I was taking all that magnesium. But what it helped me do was increase my sodium and potassium, because when you have low sodium, it's a stressor. Your
Right.
body recognizes that, and then it goes into the sympathetic fight or flight response, and then you're further depleting your other minerals. So that like really helped me. And I think honestly, taking less supplements is just so important, especially if you're someone that has like gotten to this point where you're like taking a ton of things and you're
Oh,
like,
I
I don't
know.
remember why I started that, you
Right. No,
know?
I
But
totally
that
feel.
that was helpful.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. Like we we've never been a company to push supplements because I feel that very thing. It's like I always saw my mom and my grandpa and like so many people around me. I worked in the supplement before I did Crucial 4. I was going to school for biochem and stuff. So I worked in like a health food store and I was in the supplement thing. And so I just saw this like firsthand, like these people spend all this money popping these pills when all they needed is, in your case, and probably in all their cases, but obviously, in my case, we need salt. We need more salt in our diet, right,
Yeah.
to help with the sodium potassium pump. That same correlation that you see with calcium and magnesium, it's the same thing with sodium and potassium. There's this relationship
Hmm.
there. And I think that when in our youth, our parents are feeding us, they don't know anything. That's when this epidemic kind of happened where the food supply and the food chain just got completely disrupted with garbage. They were putting so much salt and shitty sodium and shitty salts in all of our foods and all these fast foods that salt got a bad rap. And then when we all started getting
Hmm.
healthy and we stopped eating all that crap, a lot of us didn't realize how much salt we still needed back into our diet because we thought sodium was bad because it was so high in all these other foods, but it was really just the wrong types of sodium and the wrong types of these types of situations. Because even if we were taking a multivitamin, we're getting these minerals in these forms that aren't the best ever. It's like I always complain about all these different forms of magnesium, and I was just at Expo West. Saw all these companies pumping magnesium out to everyone, all these different forms. Oh, I've got this special form of tritrate, special form of blah blah blah. And I got into it with multiple people because I'm like, look, there's
Oh
only
gosh.
three. There's only three forms in nature. There's magnesium bicarbonate, which doesn't exist, which goes to my point that I let on earlier and why the magnesium's low in the water, the calcium's so high for whatever reason. Some people say
Hmm.
acid rain. It's probably something else that's caused it too. What's in food, like what we find in food, and then chloride, what's in salt, what's in the ocean, right? And if we look at our physical,
Hmm.
we're basically like this liquid ocean. We're like ocean water, basically. It's like some people say we came from the sea, and I feel like we came from the earth. We're the dust of the earth, but part of that is the ocean. So like when you get dehydrated and you go to the hospital for a massive dehydration, then they put a needle in you and they put saline, that's purified ocean water, right, inside your body to
Yeah.
rehydrate you. So I just get on my soapbox with this because I get that people want to sell magnesium in a pill, and believe me, I wish there was like a pill out there to make it work. But I just feel like nature left alone is in perfect balance, and we just need to like sit back like the Taoists do and did and are doing, and just observe, you know what I mean, like what's happening in nature when it's left alone and it's in perfect balance, and then how can we bring that into our life. And that's why like salt has been such a big thing for us at Crucial 4, why we even developed another salt, obviously. But understanding that when you come off the sad diet, that you still need sodium in your diet. You still need salt, but you definitely don't want, salt with heavy metals or microplastics, or like most salt that I've analyzed, it's high calcium, low magnesium, or and then high,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, high mercury, high lead, high all the heavy metals are super high. So yeah, it's super interesting. Like, it took me 2 years to find in minerals because it's like people don't understand the Icelandic is not a real true salt. Those salt pans are like made. We make the salt
Oh,
pans
okay.
in a shack, and we use filtration to filter out any microplastics before the salt water even gets into the pans, and then we use the geothermal energy of Iceland to evaporate the water off. No other salt in the world is done like that. Most salt runs through veins and then pops up in these salt pans on land, right? And so that's why the
Yeah.
Icelandic is so hard to get. There's only like 9 metric tons a year, and it's so different. I mean, it's 17,000 parts per million of magnesium. 17,000. Like the closest one I
Yeah,
found
which
to
you're
that
never
is
gonna
in minerals,
get.
which is only Yeah, which is like 6,000. But the only reason that's happening is because it's almost like a man-made way of procuring pure ocean water and just evaporating the water out of it. And now you're left with the product with zero microplastics and, obviously industry low heavy metals, but an
No, and
extreme.
yeah, I think that's the thing. People ask me a lot about salt and heavy metals, and I'm like, well, where is it coming from? I'm like, heavy metals are in the crust of the earth. I mean, it's really hard to avoid all
Yeah,
heavy metal
of
exposure.
course. Yeah, and people
And
want to see that
it
zero
goes
heavy
back to
metal
your
shit.
minerals.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yeah. And like it's in the crust of the earth. And also like our bodies are designed to deal with heavy metals through
Yes.
minerals. Like
Right.
if you have good mineral status, like magnesium is so important for avoid if you have a deficiency, then you're so much more likely to accumulate heavy metals like aluminum, and arsenic, and even mercury, and like other like
That was
same thing with
me.
minerals like selenium and zinc. Yeah. So if
Yeah.
so the other thing I just want to say about this about sodium, because for me, I also like I definitely eating paleo around this time, and I was like it was very pro salt during this era, and I know a lot of paleo people still like that. I'm not against salt, but I think that there isn't enough focus on potassium,
Mm,
because sodium and potassium do have to be very balanced. Like you
right.
mentioned, that sodium potassium pump, if we have like too much salt, then we're going to excrete more potassium, and potassium is so important for our blood sugar, thyroid function, so many things, um, and for making it so that heart health, blood pressure, like potassium's huge. And then in the same fashion, like if you don't have enough sodium and you have a lot of potassium, then you could deplete your sodium levels. So like it's just like calcium, magnesium, like you do want
Right.
them to be in balance. But I think with sodium, it's just so easy to get enough. If you're using salt with food, like I love adrenal cocktails. I put like a quarter teaspoon of sea salt in there. It's very easy. I find most people have to work much harder to try to prioritize potassium rich foods
Yeah.
and balance out the ratio that way. But that is one thing that, like, when I was able to increase my sodium and potassium, which I think was through like obviously food, but also like your thyroid is really important, because your thyroid hormone, it helps power that sodium potassium pump. And
Right.
so for me, I think that I was not producing and utilizing adequate thyroid hormone, and so that was also keeping my sodium and potassium low. So when I started very cautiously using iodine, even now I look back, I'm like, I was not taking that much, but I was so nervous because in college and dietetic school, they make you so afraid of iodine. They make it
Right.
sound like you're gonna die in
Right.
if you take iodine. I was probably only taking like 5 milligrams, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not that much. And that's what helped break down my calcium shell and help me move the needle. But it also helped me raise my sodium and potassium, because then I was able to utilize that thyroid hormone better, which you need for sodium potassium absorption as well.
Yeah.
So it was like for me, I think it was a combination of the simple things, like focusing way more on food. Sometimes I feel like in the nutrition space, we can get away from that because you get so absorbed with like lab testing and different protocols.
Yeah.
But I think simplifying it, going back to the foods that you're eating, and then stress. I mean, ultimately, I was living in a way where I was going to be burning through my minerals no matter what. And so, and I feel like this will be, I just have the personality where like I really enjoy working. I love learning. Now I have a daughter, and it's like I can't ever do anything normally. Like I have to do everything like to the extreme. So I feel like that with parenting as well. And so for me, I'm always kind of pulling myself back, because if I start to feel like dysregulated, like, or maybe like my mood's not as good, I'm like irritable a lot easier. If I get like super clumsy, I know like my nervous system is like very off. And that's,
Hmm.
for me, that's a huge part of my health journey, how I maintain my health. And because I'm constantly talking and learning about minerals, so it's like I can't not think about stress, because that's just such a big component.
Right. What are your favorite potassium rich foods?
Who doesn't love potatoes? I love potatoes, and I really like fruit. I actually don't do amazing with my blood sugar balance with fruit. Sadly, I used a CGM for a while postpartum, and it was like one of the things that was making it hard for me to like sleep well at night. So I don't go crazy with fruit, but I love like mango. Um, and I would say like I also really like red meat. Like red meat and salmon are probably my two other favorite potassium sources. And then black beans. Love black beans. And they're also a
That's
great source of
awesome.
potassium.
No, that's badass. Yeah, I love dates. I'm a date guy, and the thing I was
Oh
gonna
yeah.
add.
Who doesn't love dates?
Right, who doesn't love date? I do like dates with walnuts, and then I even found a date sugar. I'm looking at creating a hydration product, and I definitely want to get the potassium up. And I can get
Ooh.
potassium from Salt Lake. They have like got a derivative of it from there, but the heavy metals I'm not too happy with. And I know that like the Icelandic has a
Yeah.
lot of potassium stuff like that, but I've been looking at coconut sugar, and I found a new coconut sugar that we're probably going to be a distributor for because I didn't realize this, but like all sugar, and this is kind of a divert here, but just a little factoid for everyone. All sugar out there is usually brown, right? Like when you see sugar in the raw, when you see like, and it's not
Yeah.
also before that, it's known as Jagar, and it's all brown. Well, why is it brown? Well, it's brown because it's all burnt. And you see coconut sugar, it's always brown. Like, why is it brown? It's all burnt. And I learned this last
Mm-hmm.
weekend, and I found a guy who's like doing this super gentle, low temp dehydration on coconut water and creating coconut sugar. And it's literally like these
Oh.
yellow, white, but not white because it's not bleached. We have to understand that white sugar is bleached white, like they bleach it white.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
like for me, when it's like I do a London fog every now and then, or whatever. Anytime I add a little bit of sugar to something, if I use conventional sugar that's even like organic and whatever, I use the burnt stuff, even just going like sugar cane. I just had this adverse reaction to it. I start feeling kind of acidic. If I'm working and I'm bending down and like my acids kind of start moving around, I start to feel like just
Interesting.
acidity and like all the things that the people that hate sugar now are like, I'm like, oh, this is why they hate sugar. But when I have this stuff that I've been playing with, like I've had zero reactions to it like that at all. And it's like this very clean, it just has a totally different vibration to it when I consume it. But anyways, I found date sugar too. And I was kind of playing with that a little bit as well. And yeah, so it's like, and then coconut water, but obviously you can only
Yeah,
have so
coconut
much.
water is so high in potassium.
Yeah, it's so high. So I'm looking at doing like the salt with coconut water and maybe coconut sugar. I can do a coconut water, freeze dried coconut water, a freeze dried, or the coconut sugar is not freeze dried, it's just gentle dried. And I'm looking at like a freeze dried lemon because like all these hydration products on
Hmm.
the market, they all have like natural flavors in them, and then like the forms of magnesium they use, I don't like the forms of
They're
potassium they use.
terrible. Or I did like I so I this season for my podcast, it's like mineral deep dive episode. So I did like calcium, magnesium. I did a sodium one.
Yeah,
And part of the bonus episode for that, I looked at I think it was 14 different electrolyte powders
yeah,
to
yeah,
see like the breakdown and what's in them. Oh my gosh, like they all have some sort of like stevia, monk fruit, or like artificial sweetener.
right.
And then a
Natural
lot of them just like
flavors,
the B yeah, a ton of B vitamins that are like in the least absorbable forms
right?
possible. I was just like, man, and some of these products are really expensive. And then I also put like the sodium potassium ratio because I was just like curious. It was very interesting, but I was like, there's like really not many great there's pretty much no great electrolyte
There's
products out
not,
there.
but the thing is, there's this massive market for it. I see so many people
Yeah.
buying it because they know they need better hydration, and a lot of it's because they have crappy access to water. The water they have is crap. So they're trying to like add that because that's in nature. With left alone, the water would have high magnesium. It'd have those right
Mhm.
ratios that we really need in there. We don't have that, so people are trying to like recreate that. And so when I get some of these formulas out, I want to send them to you because I want you to like look at it.
Please
Maybe you can
do.
even, yeah, maybe you can even help me. Like, we can figure out kind of some ratios. I can give you the numbers on like how much potassium's in this or that. And like even the
Yeah.
stuff I make now, it doesn't taste like. I gave some to my son last night. We were at class, we're at Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and he's like drinking it, and he's used to the one that we sometimes get. And I'm like, bro, like the only reason I bought that stuff, well, actually, my wife buys that stuff. That's why we got it. I would never have gotten that stuff. Not to talk down on it, but or her buying choices or whatever, because I don't care at the end of the day. But bottom line is not only everything you just mentioned, but like they put so much natural flavors with the stevia. It creates this thing where you think it's fucking Kool-Aid. And it's like, dude, no, it's not really supposed
Yeah.
to taste like that. Like it's actually supposed to be a little bit more saltier, you know what I mean? And so he was, but anyways, he was drinking it last night and he was like, I gotta get used to this, Dad. I'm like, okay, I'm working on the formula, you know what I'm
Oh, so
saying?
cute.
But
How old is he?
he's 10. But
Okay.
he was like, I feel great. Like he was just like going around doing this. He's like 10. He's starting to
Oh,
be a little macho man kind of, and the jujitsu really helps him with that and helps him like frag
yeah.
out some of that energy. But yeah, I could just tell, like, and he was even telling me, because I see it with a lot of these kids. They have these bags under their eyes and shit, and their kidneys are just shot from just like lack
Mhm.
of water, lack of good mineral ratio, and sure enough, like I'm just seeing him and like kind of observing this and noticing these things, and like how we can make something, for the people. But yeah, I'll have to send you some formulas, because I don't want to use natural
Yeah.
flavors. I don't want to use any flow agents. I don't want to put them in little tear sachets that are super destructive to the planet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but the trouble is creating something that tastes like what people would want to buy. You know what I mean? Like in reality,
There is like, yeah, there's like one good powder. I wouldn't call it an electrolyte powder because it's mostly potassium, but like Bumble Root, have you heard of that one?
yeah, I have.
So it's like coconut water powder based, and then there's
Right,
a teeny bit of sodium, a teeny bit of magnesium, but I mean it's basically like 800 milligrams of potassium from the
right,
coconut water. So it's great if someone needs to increase potassium. I usually have people add a pinch of sea salt to that so that it's
right,
like more of like a 4-to-1
right,
ratio, which is like technically ideal for potassium to sodium.
right.
But I think they do add stevia, um, which
Yeah,
is I'm like I'd rather just have one with regular sugar. Honestly, I don't love the stevia like
yeah.
aftertaste. It like really throws my taste buds off.
Yeah, everyone's
But
indifferent with stevia. Like,
yeah,
I had it in breakfast for years, and a lot of people didn't like it. So I'm like, all right, let's take it out. And I didn't think anyone was going to like in breakfast after that. But our sales have actually went up, within breakfast because it's more of a like an authentic herbal, like wow, everyone's like, wow. I mean, we've had a few people like, can you add the stevia back? Like, and I'm like, no, 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 we can't do
add it
that. Like,
yourself. No,
yeah, right. You need to have those bitter herbs on your palate. You need to those activate certain organ pathways, and start to actually get your health or food decisions. Like that's a huge conversation right there. Like our palates, when
yeah,
we don't have those five flavors on them and we're just getting salt and sweet, right? And we're not getting sour, astringent, and bitter, then our food choices change. Once we can balance those out, like we start craving things that are actually better for us. But if we only contour to these two, sweet and salty, then that's all we're ever going to want because that's all our biology knows that's there. And each we're mainly bacteria, right? And there's groups of
hmm
bacteria that thrive off the sugar and the sweet. But if we only feed them and that's all that grow, then what happens after that? You have an overgrowth of yeast and you have an overgrowth of all these
yeah,
things, and you're producing all this flipping mucus and phlegm, and your biofilms are all off, So it's like we need those five flavors. And so, but I'm with you on the sugar, just to go back to that, like if I make this, I wanted to put like this coconut sugar in it because for one, it's like I've never even seen coconut sugar like this before ever, and
yeah.
the coconut water powder I'm still working on because I'm most of them have maltodextrin in them and they don't tell you that, and
I
so
know.
that's something that I don't like, and something that I've been kind of working on, and why I'm almost like pushed to just do this low temp coconut sugar. But I've got to get it tested for the potassium content, see if it's even in there, because it might not be.
Yeah, I'd be very curious.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not
And
sure
if you
how
ever
much
need
it is.
help, so one of my best friends is actually a food scientist, so that's why I know like way too much about all the powders and stuff. I've
Yeah.
thought about making like my own product eventually. Not for like electrolyte powder, but like just like something like a food product.
Hmm.
But she was like, yeah, the coconut water powder is like pretty impossible because we were talking about different ways to get more minerals in her products. She makes products for kids. She's got like smash cakes and stuff that she makes out of like fruit and everything,
Yeah.
like dehydrated fruit. And she was saying how Ubies, go follow her on Instagram. She's amazing. But uh, she was saying how it's coconut water powder is very difficult because it's always going to have some sort of maltodextrin in
Binder.
it because
Yeah,
of
they
the
just
way that
spray
it's
it.
processed.
Yeah, to spray it. There, I was working with some guys that are looking at some alternatives to spray it on something else, and I was like, "Why don't you spray it on coconut sugar? Like, do the coconut
Hmm.
sugar, and then spray the freeze dried or the liquid coconut water onto the sugar, so that that's kind of the binding agent, you know." But a lot
Hmm.
of these things require they want you to like they want me to like send them hundreds of thousands of dollars to secure that development of that product, and then once that raw
Yeah.
material comes out, now I'm responsible for that, and we're actually looking at doing that. I've put a lot of money in the farm and everything I'm doing there, but as I kind of look back at some of this stuff, I'm like, maybe we should just you know become distributors for some of these raw materials, and for because a lot of these things aren't in the US. Like, I found a ton of stuff that's like in Korea, that's in Thailand, that's in Mexico, and they don't have American market for it yet, but their products are
Oh.
phenomenal. Like, I found a Cibatruic, and I'm probably butchering that probiotic, but it's basically a probiotic from infants, fecal matter, like that they've actually taken to a lab. And I was taking this stuff on the weekend, and like we were all like, after we woke up in the morning and used the restroom, we all looked at each other like, did the Loch Ness monster come out of your body, or is it just me? And they're all like, yeah, like that stuff is like
That's
legit.
hilarious.
And there's like these Korean guys, and like we went back up to their booth, and we were like talking to them and stuff, and like they barely spoke English, and like it was so hard to have that conversation. So I had to get a
Yeah.
translator in there because I'm like this. I'm like blah 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 blah, and they're like, I know, hello, bye bye, and and like
Yeah.
they didn't know
Basic
English very well.
conversation.
Yeah, so it's like, and I'm kind of used to that. I've dealt with that stuff in the past, especially sourcing herbs and stuff. But yeah,
Hmm.
so it's a interesting time we live in because we have access to pretty much anything and everything we could ever want, and knowledge is the information of the day. So much of it, so much information that it can be overwhelming. But with that comes a massive potential. I just see potential. I just see opportunity. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Is what I see. Even when the banking collapse, there's going to be opportunity. So it's just like, I don't know. I guess it's all in your mentality and how you look at things. But anyways,
I
okay.
think most
So
people take in like, oh, go ahead.
no, I'm done. You say what you're going to
I
say.
was just gonna say, I think most people take in like way too much health information,
Yeah.
and like that's like a part of the problem for a lot of people, and then they just don't know what to do. Or there's even a good amount of research around like decision making, and like the more options that you have, the less
Likely
satisfied
you'll
you're gonna be with
execute
the decision
anything.
that you make.
Yes,
Well, no, the
yes.
less satisfied that people are with the decision that they made because they're like thinking about so many other possible options.
Oh,
What Yeah, so I thought that was super interesting. Because I think about a lot of this stuff because we work with one-on-one with clients, and I would say now more than ever, the people that are coming to us have done like all the lab testing. I mean, literally everything. They're testing for mold. They're testing for everything. They've done GI maps, Dutch tests. A lot of them have done hair tests, mold testing, like for mycotoxins,
yeah,
and they still can't get to the root of their issues. But a lot of it is that they're like constantly switching from protocol to protocol, and
yep.
they're skipping the foundations, right? Like I'm like,
Right.
okay, let's just like track your food.
Yeah,
Like how much are you eating, and like let's look at, is your blood sugar actually balanced? Is this something that's actually working for you? Because I we
right.
underestimate those little things and how much they're going to impact our stress hormones, and for women that is really what's going to have the biggest impact on like our sex hormones.
Right, absolutely. I wanted to ask you. I kind of went. Oh, have you ever heard of the cell salts, the 12 cell salts? Have you ever taken those, the bioplasma?
I have heard of them when I first got into hair testing. I went through a program that they taught. That's like the first time I ever heard of
That's
them.
why I brought. That's why I'm
I
asking because I'm like when I did my hair
Yeah.
analysis and did all that, it was like that's what kind of got me on cell salts. And then this book, I wanted to show you if you're interested in it. This
Yeah,
book
show
changed my
me.
life, and so I'll have to
I
send you the
can't really
link.
see it because your screen is
Oh, my
blurry.
screen's all
Yeah, send me
jaggernautted.
the
So
link
it's
for it.
called the
Yeah.
Zodiac and the Salts of Salvation, and it basically goes into the whole idea of that when they burnt our body, they found these 12 different cell salts,
Yeah.
which
And I just remember learning about all the things that they're like different imbalances and stuff that they're good for.
right, and so based on you can use your like based on where all the planets were, not just where your sun sign is or whatever. Actually,
Mhm.
where particularly where Saturn is, where Saturn was when you were born. We have all the way that they do the zodiac through the physiology is that you're not one sign. You're actually all 12 because you are, part of that universal makeup. And this is what people need to understand. Like the true alchemy of understanding astrology and astronomy isn't to be restricted to your sun sign, where the sun was when you were born. That has nothing to do with like so much in the physiology. But where Saturn is known as it's the outside planet. Some people say, oh, it's Satan or this, and like this whole idea with the Sabbath and people go to church on Saturday. There's all these entendres that really confuse people. But at the end of the day, where Saturn is typically an area that's going to pull a lot out of you. So you're naturally going to have more tendencies to be deficient in that specific mineral based on where Saturn was when you were born. So it's kind of
That's
interesting, but
interesting.
yeah, so it's like for me, mine's calcium fluoride, which I was like, what?
Oh.
You know what I mean? But that's where Saturn was, which is in like this area, my reproductive organ area, right?
Mhm.
That's where Saturn was, and so that's typically how you kind of can start with the cell salts is like you can kind of look at the areas in your physiology where you might be deficient in an area. Just look where Saturn is on your chart and then you'll know. My son's is his ankles, and like for years he's always like, oh, my ankles are sore, my ankles are sore. So I got like the cell salt for that area, and it did help him. But at the end of the day, you can just take all 12, if you want to, because it's a homeopathic. So it's not like you have to
Oh,
worry
okay.
about
Yeah.
having too much. And I think that that's something that's very valuable and can be super impactful for people because, people tend to overdo things or underdo things. And it's like
Mhm.
finding that right dosage. And that's tough, right? Now, you obviously need to go get a baseline. And you probably when do you suggest people check their hair Miller analysis? Like every 6 months, every 3 months, every year? You know,
I think it depends on like if I have someone that's actively making changes. I mean, I always have people make changes really slowly cuz like you said, like compliance is very difficult and I think most of the time that's cuz we're giving people way too many things to do. And it's
yeah,
like how are they ever supposed to build any momentum if they can't like slowly start chipping away and like building their confidence. So I typically have people make changes really slowly and if they have a lot of health concerns like say for example they do a hair test and we see that there is really high calcium and maybe we want to eventually use iodine, then I would probably have them retest in like 3 4 months because we want to see if what we're doing is working and if it's
working.
still appropriate for them. If someone is a fast four and has very depleted minerals, which I see all the time, I usually say give it 6 months of making changes because most likely you and make sure you're working on your stress and actually addressing like how you're living because
Yeah.
if you're not you're probably not going to see a change when you retest and then you'll be discouraged. But typically it's between that like 4 to 6 month mark and then if someone's doing maintenance, like I have lots of clients that I've worked with in the past that they'll just order a hair test like once a year to check
Yeah.
in. I think that's like appropriate for that population too.
Nice. Yeah, I love that advice. I think that's a great suggestion. And, it's like if you're extreme, give your body some time, but if you're not, do it every 3 months to kind of just see kind of like where you are. That was kind of how I did it at first, and just seeing kind of like where I am and making sure I'm going in that right direction. And then I kind of lay off of it, to be honest. I haven't done one in years. I've gotten to this place to where it's like, and maybe it's because I do feel so good, and initially I did do lots of testing and I did do all that, and then I've kind of gotten away from it. I'm even bad with like formulation sometimes too, like even with recipes in the kitchen. Like a lot of times I'll make something and someone will ask me like, "Well, you got the recipe for that?" And I'm like, "No,
Oh,
man. Like I just
that's like my
intuitively."
least favorite question online.
Right? Yeah. Well, it's very like I get where it comes from, but for me, it's like the stress of that mentality was what
Yeah,
stressed me out. Like always counting and
interesting.
being a hypochondriac about shit and psychofanatic
Yeah,
about what I'm doing. It made me so detached from the thing that God gave me, which was my innate ability for discernment. You know what I mean? My innate ability to
yeah,
connect to Jah and ask, what I need, and then to listen with my two ears, right? And my two eyes, and learn to shut my one mouth, right? And breathe through my two
yeah,
nostrils, right? So this idea of our awareness is twofold through our like, la 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 la, and I say that to me because I talk like too much, right? So it's beneficial for me to say these things. But that's like for me, it's like where I really felt like I moved the needle the most, because now I feel like I have this innate ability to know if I need to have a little bit more magnesium or a little bit more potassium without having to be so left
hmm
brain analytical about it. Like there's something about when you get healthy enough that your ability to be able to tell when you're off, you know how to get yourself back into that kind of like balanced state. And even like with
yeah,
certain foods, it's like I was really against fasting for a long time, but I did so much in the past, and my stress. Like you keep bringing up stress, so it's like, dude, I wasn't healthy
hmm
enough to fast. I
yeah,
I wasn't ready. I didn't have enough reserves to fast. It's like I'm taking a depleted body that's deficient, and I'm stripping it farther and farther down. And that's just not beneficial, to your nervous system, your
hmm
hormones, like, like you said, like being clumsy, or just noticing you're off, noticing like, oh, you go here and then you're like, oh, what the hell? Like, what's going on? And irritable, always getting on your nerves, you know what I mean? And let alone we're constantly being hit with all this artificial magnetic fields, that are, that's not beneficial either. But that's why when I get off here with you,
One
I'm
thing I
going
want to
out.
say about testing.
Yes, yes, say.
Um, so I the other thing with testing and and I totally relate. I think like once you become an expert on your body, which is my goal for everyone I work with and hopefully everyone that's in my course, is that you don't really need to test as often, right? You start to learn how to take the cues from your body. But I think so many of us on our healing journey, we we're not practicing embodiment. We're disconnected from our bodies for many different reasons. And we're always looking to an outside source to tell us like what to do, which I understand. I mean, I was there for a very long time too.
Right,
But if a lab test is not going to change what you're currently doing, like if you're not even eating enough or you know that you could definitely make changes with food that you haven't felt ready to make, I would say don't do the testing. Like,
right.
like if the lab test isn't
Compliancy,
going to change what
man.
you're doing,
Yeah,
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 you don't really need to do it. For
yeah.
myself, like I hadn't done testing. I'd only been doing it maybe like once a year. And then postpartum, I'm like, okay, I'm doing a lot more frequent of like lab testing to see like where I'm at with different things and to like support different like imbalances in my body. But it's interesting because I'm like, yeah, I haven't done this in like a while, because it wasn't going to change what I was currently doing. But now it's like, especially with breastfeeding and stuff, there's so many different factors that are depleting me. So it's been helpful for making sure like I'm on top of different things there. But if someone doesn't think it's going to change what they're currently doing, I'm like, you probably shouldn't do the testing.
Yeah, and yeah, it's like compliancy, and it's one thing to know what's wrong. It's another thing to implement. and but typically what we have to understand, it's something that you don't want to let go of, that's going to actually get you into a better situation. And you just have to face that and understand that it's going to be challenging. If we think that we can go get a test and take a couple pills or supplements or minerals or even foods and everything's going to get fixed, we have to understand that we're spiritual beings living in a physical body. We're not physical beings living in the spiritual realm. So there's a lot going on that we might not left brain be able to analyze, that we have to understand. Like maybe there's, you could go into your past, we could go into our past traumas. Like so many of us have traumas,
Yeah.
birth trauma. If you were born in a hospital and your mom took an epidural and you did the whole medical way of birth, you have birth trauma. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I know I had birth trauma. Like, I talked to my mom. She's like, the birth wasn't too bad, blah, blah. But the way that that's done, like, my children were born in the water. Like, my wife was on her knees in the water. And, like, that type, and that still could be traumatic for an infant.
I
Like,
was
there's
gonna
just,
say women that birth at home can have birth trauma too, but
yeah, exactly. Because if they're not doing the breathing right, or if the doula's not doing things right, or this or that, but at the end of the day, there's all these things that we don't see, that we can't measure, that we have to take into consideration. And I feel like those are the things that block people from compliancy more than anything else. Because, like, what is the thing that keeps people from complying? Like, obviously, they got these tests. They know what they need to do. They've had Amanda tell you, hey, Amanda's telling you this is what you need to do. But why do some people, not all people, why do some people still not go that route? And I feel like there's this underlying
yeah.
thing that they might want to look at. And I think that through that awareness, through that consciousness, that veil gets lifted, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's because maybe this happened to me. And just through that acknowledgement, that I see people, like, now they can actually make those changes. It doesn't have to be therapy. They don't have
So
to go
yeah,
do psychedelics or any of that shit. Like, they can just, like,
yeah.
be aware of what's going on. Like, awareness is key. Like, consciousness is key. It's king and queen. It's omnipresent. And so it's like, once you're aware of things, then your will seems to basically upregulate or level up, and your ability to move through the obstacles. It's like, because it's like a lot of times I feel like people think that, oh, it's just going to be so easy and everything's just going to get better, but they don't really truly have a fully understanding of what happened to them or what's going on with them. But once they do have that full understanding, and they understand, like, man, yeah, I'm going to have to work on this. Like, this is just part of kind of like my nature. And I've had some things maybe happen to me in the past, and I've had these mineral imbalances, and they've kind of, they're physiologically making me respond in these ways to a degree, because we always have our will, but once we have that full encompassing understanding, I think now we can actually tackle these goals and actually execute them, and start checking boxes and get results, right? So,
Yeah, so I have like such a different perspective on that,
no, let's
and
hear
just
it.
like compliance in general. So
Yeah.
I feel like I have a lot of the women I work with are like the ones that are doing everything to a
Hmm.
T. Lots of type A women, and it's almost too good, right? They're doing too much. They're doing it without much intention, and they're doing it to like check off boxes off of a list, very much like how I was on my healing journey. And I think that the issue is that it's because, and a lot of times like they don't even know that they're avoiding something deeper, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So and then but they come to a point where when they're finally, I think a lot of people cannot deal with their past trauma, or even just like really getting to know themselves and learning more about themselves, because they don't have the energy for it because
Mhm.
they're depleted. They're like their nervous system can't handle it. They're not in like a space where they can even fathom like touching that. And so many women that I work with get to that place on the journey where they stuff does start to come up, right? Like especially when you start eating enough, and slowly shifting your mindset and your priorities, I feel like then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I actually have like energy and resources to focus on this thing that I've been ignoring from my past for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I think on the healing journey, you can like have a lot of that stuff come up when you don't deal with it and address your nervous system regulation. I think that's when people hit a wall and a lot of frustration can come up. Um, especially with like hormones and like fertility and stuff. And then I think it's like, when you do go down that route, it's like a whole new way of like learning yourself and who you are and how to regulate and understand like your nervous system. Cause I feel
Mm,
like a lot of the stuff you were saying before, how like you don't always necessarily like need to like lab tests and stuff. It is about knowing like when are you balanced? Like when is that
yeah.
nervous system in regulation and when is it a little dysregulated and what can help
Right.
bring you back into that regulation? And
Yeah.
you know for yourself like the foods and stuff that do that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I had to do the testing first. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
and so there's no way around that, especially in this day and age. Like you need both sides of the hemisphere working together, not just one, right? So it's like you
Yeah.
can't be too savant, clairvoyant about things, but you also, can't be too analytical and left brain and like test about things and type A type about things.
Yeah.
It's
It's
a
a beautiful
balance.
balance that can be hard to achieve.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
it's
have
not.
to go in like 15 minutes, just so you know, because I have to put my daughter down. Um,
Yeah,
I can
let's
just
wrap.
hear her like yelling. So I
Oh, I'm so
just need
sorry.
to
Yeah.
tell you.
Well, look, we're up on the
It's
hour.
okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And good for you being a new mama. I'm proud of you. And I'm glad that you are raising a superhuman over there and just
Oh my
commend you.
gosh. She's
So,
huge too. I like
good.
can't believe how like big she is. It's like
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, so is there anything else you want to leave anyone with? Like, let's get it. I'm supposed to ask you questions, but no big deal. I was gonna ask. Well, let me.
we can like quickly go through those if you want.
Yeah, like I'll just ask you one. Like, what's your favorite Crucial 4 product?
Oh, can I do two?
That's fine.
Okay, so I mean, obviously the sea salt. I feel like that's everyone's favorite product. But I really like the colostrum, and it's hard to find a good quality colostrum.
Mhm.
So that is one that is definitely like I feel like those two are a tie.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm actually creating a postpartum blend right now with the colostrum, and I
Ooh.
found A2 regenerative whey
Mm-hmm.
concentrate. So I actually couldn't find it anywhere. It doesn't exist, but I found some cheesemakers, and I'm going to buy their whey from them, and then I'm going to process it, and we're going to have a regenerative A2 whey. I'm looking to add that to the colostrum for this postpartum
Oh.
blend. With a little bit of collagen, but not a lot, and a little bit of sea salt. I thought about
Yeah.
pearl and things like that, but that's cool because and I'm also doing a video today after this. After I got to go outside for a little bit and come back on our colostrum.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people understand like the testing that we have done and how we harvest it in single origin. It's undefatted, undenatured, all this cool stuff. So that's awesome. And could you go ahead and one more time leave like your angle? Again, I want to tell everyone if you haven't got a hair analysis, mineral analysis done, don't just think to go run and do one. Look at Amanda's course so you know how to read the hieroglyphs that you're going to get from your
Yeah.
test and help understand you and understand that like through all this conversation that her and I had, where I'm at today, where she's at today, isn't where we started. We started with the testing, we started with information, and I just feel like starting with the foundation of mineralization and understanding that foundation will set you up for success. You have to build a house on a solid foundation, and we are made of minerals. Like that's like the main thing that
Yeah.
operates us and navigates every single physiological reaction in our body. So, Amanda, could you please leave anything you want to leave, your handle, your website, email, however you want us to contact you?
Yeah, so I'm at Hormone Healing RD on Instagram. My website is hormonehealingrd.com. If you're really enjoying learning about minerals and a few of like those highlights, definitely check out my podcast. It's called the Are You Menstrual Podcast. You can find it anywhere podcasts are played, and I have the video version on YouTube because this season's all mineral deep dives. I mean, it's very nerdy. I love it. I think it's really fun. But if you're wanting to learn a little bit more, because I feel like it's always nice to do that before you dive right into testing. And we have a mineral quiz if you're like is this an issue for me? I'm not really sure. You can kind of get like a ranking whether or not you should focus on minerals. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy our conversations.
Always, always. And yeah, thank you. So that's it. It's gonna keep recording, but we're gonna edit everything after the thank you. You're
Okay. Thank
uploaded
you.